Running a Fever, Episode 392, Aging Reversed, Part 5, Calorie Restriction and Fasting. Welcome to Running a Fever. I'm Michael Davis. This is a podcast about fitness, diet, and medicine. My goal is to live a long, healthy, happy, active life right up to the very end. And I do it by loving my life enough to make it last as long as possible. In this series, we're talking about how to stop or even reverse aging based on some scientific research in this specific field. Thus far, we've explored the idea of treating aging as a disease. We've also gone into the information theory of aging, and we've studied several genes that are particularly important in the aging process. And more importantly, in the potential for reversing aging. Today is all about caloric restriction and fasting. We'll discuss the benefits of calorie restriction and intermittent fasting on longevity. You know, longevity's been a part of the podcast for as long as I can remember. So throughout this series, I've been combing the archives for episodes in which we discussed some of these topics. We've looked at fasting and calorie restriction before. In particular, look at episode 132. We also discussed it in 198, and there were other times, I'm sure. Now we want to talk about calorie restriction in the context of longevity gene activation from a genetics point of view. In his book, Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to, David Sinclair writes, "There is no best diet. We're all different enough that our diets need to be subtly and sometimes substantially different too." It's a variation of my mantra, become an expert in your own health. Not everything we say here will apply to you, so take that to heart. And we're not talking about malnutrition or starvation, of course. These are not paths to good health or longer life. Quite the opposite. What we're talking about is intentionally eating less than what we want. And it's nothing new, really. Hippocrates recommended fasting as a treatment for certain illnesses in the 5th century BC. He believed that eating when you were sick was like feeding the disease. A 15th century nobleman named Luigi Cornaro took on asceticism in his mid-30s after a life of wine, women, and song. In what was perhaps the first self-help book, his first discourse on the temperate life, he wrote, "I accustomed myself to the habit of never fully satisfying my appetite, either with eating or drinking, always leaving the table well able to take more." He died at the ripe age of 100. Alexandre Guignot, a professor in the Paris Medical Academy at the turn of the 20th century, was mocked for believing that hunger would lead to good health, but he lived to be 102. In 1918, the same scientists who discovered vitamin A proved that female rats whose growth was stunted due to lack of food earlier in life lived longer than those that ate plenty. A 1935 Cornell University study found that rats fed a diet of 20% indigestible cellulose lived significantly longer than those fed a normal diet. Studies continued throughout the century, confirming the idea that caloric restriction extends life. Engaging the survival circuit, directing the lives of sirtuins, as we talked about in the last episode, see runningafever.com/391, requires a delicate balance. Too much cellular trauma causes confusion and speeds up the aging process. However, just enough stress at the cellular level engages that survival circuit and increases lifespan. With calorie restriction, the key is to have just enough intake, but not too much. In Okinawa, children eat less than 2/3 of what children in mainland Japan do, and adults eat 20% less. Okinawa is famed for the longevity of its residents, and an unusually large number of centenarians live there. It is one of Dan Buettner's blue zones. We reviewed his book, The Blue Zone Solution, in episode 128, which of course is available at runningafever.com/128. I'll have all these links and more in the blog, which, as you can probably guess, will be at runningafever.com/392. Studies of humans in this regard is problematic, given the danger of malnutrition, but observations have been made, like the one on Okinawa. Another observational opportunity was found in the Biosphere 2 experiment, where a restricted diet resulted in lower body mass, blood sugar level, and cholesterol levels. Some practitioners of restrictive diets claim that it is difficult to deal with hunger at first, but that you get used to it or aren't hungry anymore. Intermittent fasting is another way to get this effect without long-term hunger and potentially dangerous consequences if you get it wrong. It's become a bit of a fad in recent years, but it has been studied for a long time. A 1946 study of rats found that rats that didn't eat every third day lived 15 to 20% longer than the control group, and human studies are proceeding now. A hormone found in the liver called IGF-1 has been found to relate to life expectancy. Mutations of this hormone and its receptor gene are found in females with centenarians in the family. The level of IGF-1 has an inverse relationship to longevity. One study found reduction of IGF-1 in people who participated in the study by eating a calorie-restricted diet 5 days each month. Fasting is also associated with some blue zones, which are places with statistically high numbers of centenarians, like Icaria, Greece, where strict practice of the Greek Orthodox fasting rules mean adherents participate in some kind of fasting for half of the year. Some fast even more often. As you can see, there are a number of ways to do periodic fasting instead of long-term calorie reduction, without having to go hungry and walk the thin line of what is too much and what is not enough. And importantly, we don't have to change what we eat, only how we eat. Of course, eating healthier does make one more healthy, but we can still get the longevity benefits of caloric restriction without changing our diets. So what about that diet? If we want it to be healthy and contribute to our longevity, what should it consist of? One thing is food which is low in amino acids. That means, for the most part, getting our protein from plants. Studies show that consumption of meat and eggs causes increased rates of cardiovascular disease, the number one killer, by the way, and cancer, diseases we are more susceptible to as we age. We briefly mentioned the enzyme mTOR in our last episode. Like sirtuins, it can put cells in survival mode and extend life, but when it is reduced. The amino acid leucine can activate mTOR, and that disengagement of the survival circuit causes cells to multiply more, which is why leucine helps build muscle and is found in the protein shakes that bodybuilders consume before, during, and after working out. Those drinks could be causing us to age faster due to the activation of mTOR. But some hunger is necessary. If you eat the same and burn off calories more by exercising, the longevity effect is not produced. Nor can you eat low-calorie food that is filling. It's about eating less, not the raw calorie count. We'll explore exercise in more detail in the next episode. However, reduced calories mean a reduction in body temperature, and this coldness has also been associated with longevity. We'll go into more about the cold and longevity later in this series. Some supplements can mimic the effect of caloric restriction, and we'll discuss those in the upcoming episode on future medicines and technologies for reducing or reversing aging. But for this episode, we're just about done. I have a small favor to ask. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like the episode. You can also subscribe, and if you want to be notified every time a new episode comes out, click the bell button for notifications. I hope you found this discussion enlightening and entertaining. It's made me even more curious about eating a low-calorie diet, whether long-term or short-term. And I think I'll give it a try. Also, be sure to stay tuned for the next couple of episodes of the show, which I teased a little bit here, because caloric restriction plays a role in there as well. So until next time, if you've got the fever, keep on keeping it burning. And if you don't, catch the fever, and I will see you next time on Running a Fever.